as the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber.
To silent. Apologies. We have apologies from Lord Morrow. Any other apologies?
Cal Boylan will be here. He's just running a bit late this morning, but no other apologies.
Okay. Chairperson's business. Just refer members to an invitation from our SPB inviting us to go to their newly refurbished reserve in the Belfast Harbour, and that's on page 5. We already agreed previously that we would go and see the reserve. You'll love it. It's so strange, right in the middle of the harbour with all the big tankers and, you know, all around it. And then suddenly there's this little oasis of little green bit, and then you have bird hides, and you can see all the migrating birds coming through Atlantic, the north, and everywhere into the Belfast Loch. Is really quite interesting. Yeah, and they have now extended it. It's a new building, I think. So Clark's suggestion, I think, is a good idea. In September, we have planned to go for our planning day, like strategic planning day. If we go there, we have some lunch, and if it's suitable. So Ciara's been talking to them, see if there is a room or something for us to be there. It would be nice. It would be handy enough to Belfast. Okay, so we'll update you if that's going to happen in September. Then next thing is another invitation inviting me and yourself, Pam, to the Carnegie Trust event on Wednesday the 10th. That's on page 6 with the former Permanent Secretary of the Scottish Parliament after the Wellbeing Framework Conference. It's going to be, I think it's going to be at the Trust, isn't it? Or something. But unfortunately, I won't be able to go. They're inviting all the committee chairs and vice chair. So I think the clerk's going to say that I won't be able to attend. So if you're interested, I think there'll be lots. So
Where is it?
Page 6. I think it's at their place, is it?
Was it the Bar Council, wasn't it? I think.
Oh, at the Bar Council, that's right. Ooh. No, it's going to be at the Crumlin Road jail.
At what time is that? So just
5:30 for 6 p.m.
I don't think I can do that either.
It's a Wednesday. It's next Wednesday, the 10th.
No, I can't.
Then both of us won't be able to go. Yep. Then another one is another invitation for me to chair a session of the Northern Ireland of the Policy Forum Northern Ireland on planning issues. Unfortunately, it's scheduled on a Tuesday, 1st of December this year. I chaired one, and Lord Morrow also chaired another session for them last year, but that was, I think, was a Wednesday or Friday. But Tuesday, you just never know when will probably be needed here. So again, a decline. Yep. Thank you. Then we can look at. Oh, we can. Minutes now. Okay. Hello, you're very welcome, Barry.
Thanks very much.
You made the quorum.
Right. We're going well now.
So, members, minutes at page 11. So you agree with the minutes?
Great.
Okay, thank you. Matters arising then, page 17. Members, you have the cover note there. Items 4.1 and 4.2 on pages 18 and 20 are both outstanding responses from two councils on their recycling policies. Members may remember last week we looked at all the responses from different councils on the food waste collectors and on the recycling policies. So we've got two more. Members, are you content to note? Okay, then item 4.3 on page 21 is a progress report on the implementation of the action measures in the road safety strategy to 2020. At the delivery board meeting in April, the board was content with progress to date of the short-term measures due to complete by the end of 2013. There is one outstanding measure that is nearly complete, so in the near future. The board noted with concern the increase in fatalities last year and this year, in addition to mitigating measures that are already being taken. The board agreed to establish closer working arrangements between road safety partners and a more coordinated and joined-up approach to the delivery of road safety education activities. Even though they said that there are no details about the partners and what those activities are. So members, are you content if we write to ask them who the road safety partners are and what the impact of closer working relationships will mean really in practical terms? Is that okay? Thank you. Item 4.4 on page 91 is a response from the department to the recommendations made in our report on wind energy. Members, the committee has previously agreed to invite Windwatch and I to brief us. They've asked to come and brief again. So we've said to them once the department's response is received that we would invite them. I thought the response, although fairly detailed from the department, they were going down, recommendation by recommendation, basically kind of saying, we are, after the publication of the SPPS, that they are going to take a review of their strategic planning policy on renewable energy, and also they are preparing a review of guidance for councils on this. So kind of a lot of our recommendations are saying, well, we'll look at your recommendations during the exercises, of both issues of the guidance and the review. I think members, have been quite concerned about the review of the ETSU 97. They are saying they will further investigate into this. So, not. I know the ministers had said probably more in his response to us during our motion. For example, about the planning, should have planning application at the same time with applying to the grid. The response from the department is now saying really they can't do that. And so there are a lot of issues, and I think their responses on the recommendations are not, kind of very positive to me. So I think if we invite the Windwatch people and ask for their comments on the responses before then we talk to the department, we can schedule for Windwatch to come next week, and then the following week we can have the department to come and give a oral presentation on or briefing on their responses, and then we can ask questions, maybe more constructive that way. What do you think?
It's good to have a written briefing from Windwatch too, though. Yeah. Well, I suppose they'll bring the written one.
If they can give us a.
It's just good to have it laid out in pointers, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
But they'll bring that before they come for an oral briefing, so that's.
Yeah. Would members, if they can make it for next week?
Yes.
They can. Okay.
Well, we haven't approached them yet, so
Okay.
we'll certainly ask them, but the department weren't available on the 18th. It was the 25th. So it would be 2 weeks then. It would be the 25th of June before scheduling the department in.
Okay.
Okay.
So, Windwatch can either come next week
Or
or
the
the week
18th,
after,
whichever
something.
suits them
There were
best.
2 weeks
Yeah,
then
yeah.
for them. And you'll be chairing next week's meeting. Okay, members, then we agreed with that then. Item 4.5 on page 116 is a report on the committee's informal meetings at the Balmoral Show on the report towards a land strategy for Northern Ireland and the Refit initiative with representatives from the environment NGOs. I want to thank the staff too again for organising it and producing the report. Very thorough report, thank you. Members, are you content then for us to write to the department regarding the issues raised in the meeting, summarised in the report at pages 117 and 119? And we'll attach the report
Yes,
from the NGOs. Quite interesting. I thought the bird register, the tree register is quite interesting. Yeah. Okay, members. Then next item 4.6 on page 120 is a correspondence from the Woodland Trust providing further information on the proposed register of trees of national special interest. So, members, are you content then to forward the correspondence to the department? Okay. Then, members, have you any comments on any other items, or are you content with the suggested actions on the cover note? Content?
Content.
Then we move on then, members. Page 4 of your tabled papers is the 16th report of the Examiner of Statutory Rules. The Examiner has drawn the committee's attention to drafting errors in the Hazardous Waste Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2014. The Examiner has contacted the department who intends to make further regulations to correct the errors. The Examiner has also noted that the regulation was laid in breach of the 21-day rule. Members content to look. We've heard about this before, haven't we? This is just to confirm it by writing.
Okay.
Yep. Next item, refer members to a copy of the Minister's statement to the Assembly regarding the North-South Ministerial Council meeting held in environment sectorial format at page 13 of tabled papers. The Minister referred in his statement to a draft report or interim report on the air quality research study, which will be emailed to members. I think he said at the time in the chamber that the report was with the Assembly Library, but not so really. It's not there yet. Okay. So we are going to have it emailed to us, quite a lengthy report as well. Yeah. So, members, obviously, there's been a lot of, I think, interest in this. I know members that ask questions, and so, members, would you want to ask for an oral briefing, maybe in the new session in September, on this report?
Good idea.
Yeah. Even though it's just the interim report, but it's quite a detailed report. Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Then item 5, engaging heritage with community planning conference report, and we're going to get a briefing from our researcher Susie Cave. Susie, you're very welcome. Thank you. You change your hair colour. Shouldn't say these things, should I? Lovely, very nice. Yeah. So just to remind members that the committee agreed at our last meeting that Susie from research would attend a seminar on engaging heritage with community planning on our behalf and prepare a report on the seminar. There's a briefing paper at page 21 of your tabled items, page 21. Susie, was it an interesting conference?
It was, especially, well, for me, it was because of the heritage aspect. It was something that I hadn't really looked at or considered whenever we were looking at community planning before. So,
Yes, this is something new, isn't it?
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
really mentioned previously.
no,
Yeah,
it hasn't
yeah.
really been mentioned explicitly in any of the,
No.
the foundation programme.
No.
But hearing from the specifics of it and the practical sort of experiences of some of the groups that are out there and how they're going to try and get
Was it well
involved.
attended?
It wasn't. Well, I don't know what they were expecting, but
Okay.
there were enough there anyway. Yeah.
Okay. Right, I'll let you get on with your briefing. Thank you.
So yes, there's a table paper, and it just provides a bit of a summary of the conference. So I'll keep this briefing quite short. The conference was basically just an early stage discussion, bringing together practitioners from the heritage sector to explain to them the concept of community planning and the opportunities that it presents for them and how these organisations can become involved in the regime. So it started with Colin Bradley from Community Places. He provided a bit of an explanation of community planning, where it came from in the legislation. Now, I'll not go into the details of that, but you can access his presentation from page 2 of my paper.
He trained councillors on community planning.
Yes, and they offered an awful lot of training programmes, so yeah, they went around each council. So it was good to hear from his sort of practical experience and how they can try and get involved at this stage, this early stage. So yeah, that's how he introduced the concept of linking heritage to community planning. So he explained this could be done through the community plan, the local development plan, and then the broader aims of community planning, such as well-being. So with encouraging healthier lifestyles, supporting local economies and reducing inequalities. He explained that community planning provides a broader canvas so that anything that does not fall under the tighter scope of the land use planning system can be picked up by community planning. And presentations that continued from Ian May from DOE, Sustainable Northern Ireland, and the Ulster Architectural Heritage Society. They focused on identifying these links between community planning and heritage and how this presents opportunities for the sector to try and put the value of heritage onto the local agenda. Then presentations from Derry and Strabane District Council and Belfast City Council spoke more of the practical experience of beginning to implement community planning with the development stages of their community plans. A particular detail was given on the approaches used to engage and consult with the local communities in identifying areas of focus. Both councils differed slightly in their approaches. For example, Derry and Strabane put a call out for all partners who would be interested in being part of 8 thematic working groups covering social, economic and environmental aspects. These are to meet now over the next coming months. And these groups are to identify priorities and outcomes for the community plan in relation to their specific topic. And in total, they received 700 partners to sign up to these groups. Whereas Belfast, through its Belfast Conversation Scheme, is using a slightly more open approach with a series of workshops that will be held throughout the city for anybody to attend. And then anybody who can't, they have an online questionnaire, or they can make a response via Facebook or Twitter. Again, the purpose is similar, where they hope to get the community's ideas for a long-term vision and short-term actions that will eventually form the community plan. Presentations also identified a couple of guides that would be useful to the heritage sector. Dim Kitchen from Sustainable NI spoke about their new sustainable planning guides called Places for People. Now these will be, these are specific to each new council area, and their aim is to consider themes that might not be explicitly expressed in the planning system, such as preserving the historic environment. And he explained that the heritage sector could use these guides to help identify potential in each council area. Second guide was from the Ulster Architectural and Heritage Society, called Built Heritage Handbook for Belfast. In comparison to the one that Jim Kitchen explained, this is more specific to heritage only. And I give a list of the topics that it covers on page 5 of your paper, one of which is the promotion of heritage through Belfast's assets, and considers the roles of local councils, communities and heritage groups in doing this. So as I said, really, this was just an early stage discussion to get the main stakeholders together in the same room and to ensure they are aware and make use of the opportunities to promote heritage under the community planning regime. So if members have any questions, or if they would like any further detail.
There is always, I think to some people, about community plan and development plan. What's the difference? There is the local development, that is land use, isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
And then community plan is the all,
It's the all overarching, encompassing.
all
yeah.
encompassing plan.
The community plan is supposed to provide the framework under which the local development plans will be developed.
Quite interesting. What's the timeline for them then to produce the community plan?
Well, I know Belfast is hoping to have their community plan, which will be called Belfast Agenda, in operation and produced next year. So they're working to the autumn to try and produce a draft, and then that will go out for consultation.
It would be the
With all
quickest, I
partners.
think. I think they're given about 3 years to produce it, isn't it? Yeah. Yes. And I think they need really to produce it quickly, if not, then look at the B map. 15 years on and just out of date. Yeah. Any questions for Susie, members? No?
No.
Right, okay. Thank you. Thank you for doing it for us. Yeah, okay. Right, members, then, no follow-up, you're just content to note the report? Yeah. Thank you.
Nice crack, lad.
Next item 6, is the Local Government Community Planning Partners Order NI, and an update on the implementation of the Community Planning Foundation Programme, members. There is a briefing paper from the department on the Local Government Community Planning Order at page 28 of your tabled paper. This briefing was not received in time for members' packs. Also, the committee had expected to receive a briefing on the synopsis of responses on the guidance on community planning consultation. The clerk was advised yesterday afternoon that this would not take place today. A letter is tabled from the department explaining that the synopsis is not available. If I can welcome Liz Loughran, the Acting Director of Local Government Division. That's Liz there.
No, Liz isn't actually here this morning. It's Nick McRae here and Joanne Mullen.
And just, okay, sorry, Joanne Mullen. Joanne, you are from the Local Government Division as well?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And then Liz, and then Nicola. So we have Nicola Craig.
Yeah.
So why is Liz not able to come? We had her down for coming today.
She just wasn't able to make it this morning. Just so I'm the in charge of the areas around community planning and performance improvement. So I get the opportunity.
Thank you. Yeah.
I love the way you put that.
Yeah, I have to think of a word.
I thought you were going to say short straw.
That's it.
Being diplomatic.
Very diplomatic. Sorry, Chair.
Okay, we just heard a bit about the community planning conference from Susie. So Liz, if you can please go ahead and give us your briefing.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, as I say, I'm Nicola Cray from the local government policy area, and I look after the team who deals with community planning and performance improvement. And this is Joanne Mullen, who's also a member of the team. So thank you very much for the opportunity to brief you this morning. And this is obviously the local government Community Planning Partners Order. As you've said yourself, not the guidance, which will follow on the 18th of June, and which is also in relation to community planning. So, community planning itself, what is community planning? Well, as a committee, I know that you're all extremely well informed about that. So, and also, I know very enthusiastic supporters of community planning. But as you know, community planning itself is a new duty which has been given to councils from the 1st of April. And it really is a unique opportunity, I think, for councils to work with other organisations to really set the long-term objectives, social, economic and environmental for their areas. And the Partners Order itself then is the opportunity to identify those organisations who must work with the council to put in place the community plan. Now, the organisations that are listed on the order are those which will be required under, obviously, statute to work with councils, but there is a wide range of other organisations, as you expect, who will work with councils on a voluntary basis in producing the community plan. And I don't think that there should be any inference that any of those partners who aren't named in the order are in any less way important or of any less a contribution to make, because obviously that is likely to include, some quite key players in an area. Could be universities, could be voluntary groups, could be other groups within the area. So although the order is requiring a number of organisations to participate and who must participate, I do think it is important to remember that those other organisations have an important role to play. So then, really, in identifying the organisations who are on the list that you've got at present, the department really looked at the rationale for that was that those organisations which delivered significant services that promoted the economic, social and environmental well-being of the district and provided services across the whole region. So obviously, if you're named in this order, you must participate with all councils. So if an organisation, worked in only one particular area, it wouldn't be appropriate to name them on a list which required them to work with them all. So that was also a reason for saying that it was organisations that worked across the whole 11 district council areas. So again, the list that you have before you, which has a number of organisations on it, that was developed before it went out for consultation through a process of quite extensive pre-consultation engagement, and that included working with councils themselves and also engaging with a number of the organisations who may have been included on that list. And taking the learning that came out of the Community Planning Foundation programme, which all councils and other organisations participated in the 14-15 year. So it was informed by all of those particular engagements, and all of the organisations who were listed on it, again, were keen and enthusiastic members and wished to be listed. So there wasn't any, people that were, had to be dragged kicking and screaming by any means. It did then go out for consultation, as you know, and that was an 8-week consultation programme which closed on the 12th of December. Again, it was 8 weeks primarily because of the degree of pre-consultation that had went on and the general consensus, again, from all those organisations that they did wish to be listed. The results of that consultation process you have in your synopsis. We had 45 responses. of which there was no disagreement to any of the organisations which are listed, quite the reverse. I think that was generally welcomed. There was a small number of additional organisations proposed, and of those we're proposing the inclusion of 3 more organisations, and that would be CCMS on the education side, Libraries NI and Sport NI, and again each of those organisations themselves wish to be included as statutory partners, and we propose that they would be included on the list. The other main response, which again you're probably aware of, is that all of the councils who responded and a number of other public bodies, including PSNI and the Housing Executive, also asked for departments to be included on the list. So that would be the 12 government departments to be included on the list. Now, initially departments were not included on the list for the reason that within the legislation itself there's a specific role set out for departments in relation to community planning, and that's to promote, encourage and facilitate community planning. And again, the legislation creates structures to promote that, and particularly the partnership panel. And that really is, a unique and innovative way for executive ministers and local government representatives to engage on a range of issues, but particularly on community planning. So on that basis, departments weren't included on the list initially, because there is other opportunities for them to become engaged. However, given the volume of responses that did request departments to be included, the Minister did explore with his colleagues as to whether that would be something that they would feel appropriate. Now, all ministers replied to say that while they are very supportive of community planning and wish it to succeed and can see the benefits of it, they wouldn't wish their departments to be named within the list of partners and within the partners order. So on the basis of that response, the Minister isn't minded to include them on the partners order. However, he does wish to continue the discussion with colleagues with a view to maybe putting in place an engagement protocol which would set out the sort of level and nature of engagement that might be expected on community planning between departments and councils and partnerships. And I think that would be beneficial in establishing some sort of benchmark for that type of involvement, and would give departments and particularly councils some assurance that that there would be engagement and that would be carried through. So that would be the situation with relation to departments, which I know that has been something which has been mentioned in a number of forums. The current situation then with the order is that, as you know, community planning came into place on the 1st of April, and councils have proceeded to establish community planning partnerships. They are involving those organisations that are on the statutory partnering list. They are all happy to be involved and are all participating currently on a voluntary basis, but there's no practical influence or impact of not having the order in place at present. So they're moving ahead with setting up the community planning partnerships. I think that's all very positive. Councils are at different stages. Obviously, some have powered ahead and are quite well advanced. Others are at a more preliminary stage. But it is very positive, I think, move towards community planning. So that's what's happening at present. And obviously, as we move forward with the community planning order, hopefully that will continue. So really, I think to conclude, I think that we believe that the current list that you have of statutory community partners will assist with the community planning process. It is the key organisations that are part of an effective part of community planning process. There is the other organisations, as I mentioned, who will participate. from business, community, voluntary sectors. And I think all of those partners together should be in a position to hopefully put in place a very productive and approach to community planning, and hopefully a community plan itself within the next year or so anyway. So thank you very much, and obviously if you have any questions we're more than happy to answer.
Okay, Nicola, thank you very much for the run through of that. Given the fact that then the departments are not included in the order, do you think it may weaken the flow of duties and resources to fulfil the aims or actions put into the community plan?
No, I don't think so, because as I say, departments have a specific role, and it's quite clear, their role is to promote and encourage community planning. And I hope that the structures that are there, particularly around the partnership panel, support that. And I think that as community planning develops, and obviously this isn't going to be something that's going to happen within the next month or two, but what we would expect to see is that community planning as a process and community plans in regard to them would start appearing, for instance, in business plans and corporate plans and those sorts of planning documents that departments create. And that in itself, I think, then will support the delivery of community planning and will emphasise the role that they have to play. And I think, again, eventually, hopefully the flow from programme for government, which is going, which should then be something which departments obviously are going to be implementing. There should be that opportunity for the programme for government to influence community planning and vice versa. So that drawing together, I think, of structures and the basic way that things will be delivered, I think, will be the key thing. So no, I don't think it will weaken it in any way.
Yeah. See, for those of us who were involved in the neighbourhood renewal partnership, I was chair of the South Belfast partnership. I think the problem wasn't bringing them in; it's making them do things that is in the plan. But the individuals who have come from different departments, they were not at that senior level either to say yay or nay to in meetings and afterwards to carry out the actions agreed. I think it is making different departments do what they can do. Another question I want to ask you is about you said the voluntary sector and the business sector can be included in community planning. How do you go about inviting them and welcoming them, and capacity building, for example, the community and voluntary sector who may not know what community planning is and what their role is, what their influence can be?
Well, I think from the department's point of view, we've been involved in a large engagement process with a wide range of organisations. And for instance, we work through NICFA and the Joint Forum and so on, which DSD has in place to deal with the voluntary side. We've had engagement with Chamber of Commerce and Federation of Businesses in relation to their type of involvement. We've had a number of other community type involvements, a wide range of organisations who've spoken to and explained what community planning is and how they might get involved, as have the councils, because obviously councils are extremely well connected to their local areas and the local groups and the local organisations in their area, and they've had all councils have had a wide degree of engagement with local groups in their areas. They've spoken to them about it, they've had engagement events, they've had a range of things. To be honest, I think you'd have had to have stuck your fingers in your ears and went la 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 la, not to have heard about community planning by now. So, you know, there has been a wide range of engagement. What we have said to particular organisations who are keen to be involved, and for instance, in relation to the statutory planning order that's before you, the education bodies that are named are obviously the Education Authority, which covers the majority now, and CCMS. Now, the integrated side and the Irish medium aren't actually named, but however, that was as a consequence of discussing with them whether they felt it appropriate to be named, and it was their choice not to be, but to engage as support partners. And I know that they've been very active in contacting councils and you know, making it clear that they wish to be involved and that they were committed and they wanted to get involved. So all of those organisations are making proactive engagements with councils, and councils likewise are making proactive engagements with them. So I think, you know, that there has been a sufficient level of engagement to ensure that happens.
Okay, thank you. Barry?
Okay, thank you, Chair. I like to claim credit for other people's wit, but Cathal Boylan wondered there, was it trending, this community media, this community planning? Is it trending yet on social media? We're not sure. But I wouldn't have the same sense of it as you. You know, I wouldn't have the same sense of it that it's alive and well. I would like to know, why is Transport NI, you know, road service, not on the list? And I would like to know if there's any examples of best practice yet where a local government authority and a health trust teamed up for community planning proper, if you're aware of any best practice examples.
Well, in terms of why Transport NI aren't on the list, it's, as I explained, they're part of DRD, and it's not possible, obviously, to name a part of a department. It would have to be DRD in its entirety. And as I explained, the reasons why departments aren't on. However, I mean, obviously Transport NI, because of its particular nature, have a role to play, and that's clear. And I know that DRD are committed to working with councils.
If I could just say at this point, other agencies of departments are listed, you know.
Yeah.
Like, for example,
Housing Executive and
Fire Service, Fire and Rescue Service. They're individual component parts of government departments as well, in the same way that Transport NI is.
Transport NI, however, is an integral part of the department. It's not an agency or an organisation that has its own structure, and that's why, really, you know, if it had have been, yes, I would agree with you. It is more than likely that it would have been named, but because it's an integral part of a department, it isn't possible to name it without naming the entire department. However, because it's of a particular nature and it provides particular services, I think DRD are very aware of the necessity to, you know, ensure transport issues are reflected within community plans, and I know that they are working with councils and ensuring that happens. But it's simply because of the way that Transport NI are structured within the department. They are named obviously in a number. Transport as an issue which are included in community plans in the likes of Scotland and other jurisdictions where that's slightly different. In relation to the local government side and health, I mean, obviously there is an existence, and again, this is probably more in relation to how community planning works rather than the partners order, but there's a number of very successful you know, partnerships already in existence within council areas, particularly around health and local government, and we would anticipate, and I think councils would anticipate, that where those types of structures work well, that they would be incorporated within the community planning process. So if you do have, you know, within your area a particularly good example of partnership working, and that could be maybe in the relationship with councils and local commissioning groups or whatever, that might be something which is actually brought within your community planning boundaries and contributes to it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Cathal?
Thanks, Chair, and thank you very much for your presentation. Apologies for being late, sir. I missed the research paper. Just a couple of points, really. I mean, I would have thought, following on from Barry's point, I would have thought saying that DRD, you know, do reports to the local authority in relation to upgrades. You know, there could have been a partnership working there, to be honest with you. I know they call it Transport NI now, but you know, every quarter they give reports to councils anyway, and you know, the jury's out on that, but I'll take your explanation on it. Just want to pick up on a couple of points. I mean, the likes of the idea in terms of community plan, if you take, say, a health hub, which I think in some areas is a good idea, I'm just a wee bit concerned about I agree with the partnership panel, but the partnership panel is only as good as the delivery and the working between here and local authority in terms of delivery. So whilst I would accept your explanation about departments staying out of it a bit, I think, you know, they're going to be a main driver in all of this, because you can't do anything without funding in the funding, especially. So maybe you could elaborate on how that partnership's actually going to work and how they're going to deliver, because the perception I have and what I'm listening to from some of the local authorities is holding people to account. If there's an aspiration to, say, develop a campus or a health hub, how would you deliver that? Because that's the expectation in all of this, you know, and that would be my only concern. So what kind of feedback, because early feedback and how they start is how they finish on this matter, what kind of feedback are you getting, you know, as you start this whole process? And I know it's early days, you know.
Well, it is early days. As you say, you know, I mean, in most jurisdictions, obviously, community planning has taken quite some time to bed in and to come to fruition. And we're only at the start of a process, and hopefully we'll learn from it. But, you know, it is only the start. I accept what you're saying, you know, in terms of how you actually ensure that delivery happens, and that is a challenge, there's no doubt about that. And I think what we have to look at as community planning develops, and which partnerships will be very clear on, is right, well, you know, when we establish a community plan, it needs to be clear what partners are actually signing up to, that whenever you say, yes, this is a community plan for the area, and here's the particular you know, actions, for instance, that will come out of that. So, for instance, it may be, you know, to look at you know, outcomes on health, and, you know, that we'd be wanting to do that through this particular mechanism, a health hub or whatever. Each of the partners will have to identify the particular area that they are going to contribute to, and I think it is right that they're held to account for that delivery. So it'll never be one person who can deliver everything, or one organisation who can deliver it all, but in signing up to the community plan, you're signing up to deliver that aspect of the community plan that you have agreed to deliver. So I think from that perspective, you know, that will provide that sort of opportunity for people to say, look, yes, I've signed up to this and I will deliver it. The partnership panel, I think, is important in that it is the overarching mechanism for how this is going to work, and it does provide that strategic interaction between executive ministers and local government. And it'll hopefully establish a broad through programme for government, eventually, you know, an opportunity to create a vision that everybody can sign up to, and an opportunity to create programme for government outcomes that everybody can sign up to. And I think that in and of itself then provides the sort of driver for actual delivery. So I think that is important, that that partnership panel is there. I think again that, you know, the delivery mechanisms have to be reflected within local or within central government planning documents and so on, so it's clear to everybody, and it's clear to all of the people who work in the department, for instance, that this is what the department is doing and this is how it's going to deliver. So I think this is a work in progress, and I think it is a matter of trying to make sure that you know, to learn from the likes of neighbourhood renewal, where I think that the problems there were partly created by the absence of people drawing together, and the absence of a real commitment to deliver that, and that commitment being expressed in actual documents and clearly from top to bottom, that people understood that. So I think we'll have to, you know, use it and see how it works to an extent.
No, it's grand. Just a couple of other points. I mean, certainly we're going to have to manage expectation in all of this here. Let's get realistic. I mean, there is some good examples of, like, you know, Derry City Council's one plan and all. There's some good ideas in that, but there was a
ideas, all right.
there was the other one, was it Fife? There's a is it Dundee or Fife? There's a Scottish model in terms of a very good document we had a couple of years ago, which clearly outlines what way we can go forward as well. One other point I want to make in terms of the organisations. Clearly, I'm from aboard the constituency in terms of the cross-border workings and all of this. I think there's opportunities in partnership as well, to be honest. You know? Can you elaborate a wee bit on any thinking in that, or?
I think, yes, you know, I think there is obvious opportunities for cross-border cooperation, cross-border working, and hopefully that's amplified a wee bit in the guidance, which you'll see, which does encourage that. Obviously, there's no cross-border organisations named on the list, although that did come back, as you can see in your synopsis, and there was some suggestions in Waterways Ireland and Intertrade Ireland and so on. Now, again, for particular reasons, legal as well as anything else, it's not possible to name some of those, and a lot of them are particular to an area. But a lot of those organisations we would envisage being involved on a support, you know, in the community planning partnership, but simply not named as partners. So, for instance, in Fermanagh and Omagh or Waterways Ireland may well, you know, join in the community planning process and be involved there, and that opportunity is there. And likewise, in other areas, there may be opportunities for other organisations to do that. And as well as that, on a separate front, you know, we do, as a department, work quite closely with Cooperation Ireland, who actually have community planning as one of their key areas they look at, and are looking at the commonality across the island in relation to community planning and how we can cooperate, and have organised a number of events last year and hopefully this year in relation to community planning and how our councils can cooperate and work with their counterparts in, you know, similar areas across the border, and that's been very successful.
Oh, and just final questions, and in terms of the border corridor groups like the East Border, the Region, and the North West, I mean, surely some consideration has been given to looking at the work they achieved so far. Yep,
and we have again spoke to ICBAN and the other groups, the North West one and the other one, can't remember the name.
East Border Region,
yeah, that's it. We have spoken to each of them about community planning. Again, they're aware of it. They're keen to incorporate it within their own planning, and most of them already do community planning in a large degree. So again, I would envisage that they would be involved with councils and with partnerships. As I say, I mean, the order is a specific vehicle to say that these organisations must be involved, but it's not in any way saying that other organisations don't have as valuable a role to play. And as I say, I think it is important to remember that, and all of those organisations I would envisage will definitely be involved in community planning and will be involved with the councils in their particular area and across areas, because, you know, it's not only that we want cross-border cooperation, which we do obviously, and where that's appropriate, I think that will be good, but also that councils cooperate as well. I mean, you know, there's 11 of them, but I mean, obviously the issues at one council don't stop, and then a different set of issues start in the next council area. So, you know, they need to cooperate as well.
Council area was Monaghan, you know, and the
yeah,
that's what I'm saying. You know, it's grand.
No, you know, it's equally valid in both areas.
Okay, Cathal. Gary?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Nicola and Joanne, for your briefing. I would have probably quite a bit of recent experience, in a sense that I was on council up to a couple of weeks ago, so I had quite a bit of involvement in relation to the community planning element, and I know back in the constituency in Foyle there's a meeting today in relation to community planning and the meetings of the thematic working groups that are coming out of that. I would agree with the Chair in the sense that the problem is not bringing people in. We've seen a high level of engagement from various partners and stakeholders, and that's been great.
the problem that I foresee, there's a huge amount of momentum at the moment. There's a huge amount of enthusiasm, but I'm already starting to hear people saying and groups saying, is this going to be another situation like the One Plan, where there's lots of ideas and great potential outcomes, but again there's a lack of action in respect of those. So I think that's the problem with the departments not being named here. As the chair did mention, what you tend to find is at the start it's great, there's a high level of engagement, but then when they realise, or they say to themselves, well, we've no actual specific requirement to be here, you find that they do tend to send note takers or people just that's going to provide a briefing to their bosses. So the key decision makers don't tend to be there, and so that's one of the concerns at the moment. And indeed, we've seen that as well during our culture year in 2013, where there was a situation where nobody knew who was responsible for what. Council clearly would say that the departments were responsible. The departments would say, well, we've no obligation, we've no money to pay for this. So it was a vicious circle where we've seen very little action at all. In terms of the community planning and other jurisdictions, I remember receiving a briefing from the community places in relation to the Dundee model, and if memory serves me right, they have similar issues in terms of, yes, they have went through the community planning process, but again, a lot of their outcomes are not being delivered on. So it was just to see, and I'm not too sure whether they have an obligation to have government departments involved in their process, but maybe you can share a bit on that as well.
Yep. First of all, I mean, I do take your point, and I think, yes, obviously, generally, whenever something maybe new starts or, there's a new initiative, people are enthusiastic about it, and, that can fall by the wayside, and that is something I think we'll have to guard against. I think in terms of trying to ensure that doesn't happen, I think the key opportunity that community planning maybe provides, it hasn't been there in the past, is that it is a two-way process. It's not purely that government departments or any other organisation are doing this as a, shall we say, where all the benefit flows to the council. This is a two-way benefit. The department or its arm's length bodies, or both, actually achieve their objectives through community planning, and I think it's that opportunity to say, well, look, we are both actually gaining out of this. Everybody wants better services, and that's the key thing at the end of the day. I mean, as a citizen, you don't care who gives you the service as long as it's good quality and meets your needs. It doesn't matter if it's a council or a department or anything. No, it doesn't matter. So I think the opportunity and the challenge is to actually deliver better services to people in a way which everybody can buy into. And I think it's that opportunity for saying, well, look, you get to deliver your services better, which is something your minister wants to do, which is clearly articulated in all of your planning documents in all of your organisations. So I think it's creating that two-way street, which will be important. The other thing on a practical level, and again, just looking at, well, how do you actually ensure that you get the right people? How do you ensure that enthusiasm is maintained? Again, looking back to the partnership panel, there has been a work plan developed, a draft work plan which has been endorsed by local and central, our executive ministers are there, and one of those action points that's come out of that is to look at look at the best practice around partnership working, which is either within Northern Ireland or within South or within Scotland or within any other jurisdictions, and actually drawing on that and saying, well, look, there's been a lot of work done on best practice. How can we take and distill that and use that productively to ensure that community planning is something that doesn't suffer from maybe the problems that existed in the past, because there's a great deal of information and learning that's developed from that, and Dundee, for instance, is one of them, both on the don't do this as much as the do this. So I think that's another opportunity that will, that will be taken forward through the partnership panel to put that in place to try and ameliorate those issues. Certainly in Dundee, and again, I've been to Dundee as well with actually members of the committee, which is very good. And I was very impressed with, with Dundee as a city and with its community planning process. It's not all wonderful and, everything's great, but I think it has made a very positive contribution. In terms of who they have as partners, obviously it's a different situation in that, councils are responsible for a wider range of services like housing and so on, so they don't have the need to have organisations named because a lot of it is within the council's own remit. But they do have organisations like Health, obviously, and the Health Service working with them. So it's slightly different given the different structures, but, again, I think that they do bring that together, and I think there is a lot of learning that we can take from the likes of Scotland and how the community planning has developed there.
The committee went to Dundee to look at local government. We were very impressed by particularly the seafront development, which is quite long term, but 20-year vision.
I think so, yeah.
And they're building a bridge, and they're bringing the Tate, building the Tate Museum Mark II in Scotland, and is that the Tate? I can't remember. It must be the Tate, I think.
Victoria now.
Oh, the Victoria, Victoria now, but museum, there, and so it's quite impressive. As far as we could see of the seafront development was excellent. Okay, Colin.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the presentation. The one plan's been brought up. We have a fair bit of experience with kind of community planning, and it's a very positive thing, and it needs to be done right. But what we found is people spent a couple of years, a lot of people, nearly everybody in the city seemed to be involved in coming up with a one plan. A good plan identified all the problems, and the solutions had key milestones and targets in it. We had the Deputy First Minister and the First Minister down launching it, and great fanfare. Then when it came to the actual programme for government up here, it was largely ignored. And as anybody around the table knows, that if it's not in the programme for government, there's very little chance of getting it actually delivered. If it's in the programme for government, there's a bit of a battle to get it delivered. So if it's not in there, it's not going to happen. So I think, and we've missed so many of the deadlines by now, and we're nowhere near where we could be if we had had full commitment from the executive. So I think that just from my own experience, and Gary will know this as well, is it's all grand having people at meetings and having people bought in, but if they don't go back and ministers don't battle to get it into the programme for government and it doesn't actually make it there, and there's no budget lines behind it, none of these things will ever happen. So I just think it's important that that's got right at the start, that people understand that it has to be, anything that is the responsibility of the executive has to be taken on by the executive and put into the programme for government and put into the departmental plans and budgets. Otherwise, it just ends up as a very nice plan that sits on a shelf and not a lot happens, and people then end up getting frustrated at the lack of delivery and the lack of change. So I just think that's just an important piece of learning from. You can have all the plans you want, but unless it's people sign up to it and actually sign up to properly delivering upon them, it won't matter,
No, I mean, again, I would fully accept your point, and that is why within the partnership panel, the opportunity which is there to feed into the programme for government is key. Again, as it was seen in the likes of Scotland, it is that generally agreed vision which drives outcomes really at the end of the day, as you say. If it is included in programme for government, if it's included in executive programmes, well, you have a reasonable chance, hopefully, that it will then be delivered. And I think, again, that feeds into the issue around each partner, be they a department or be they a council member or be they another type of organisation, then have a clear rationale for what they must do, because obviously they are being driven by their own ministerial commitments and their own programme for government commitments. So I think the part, community planning, I think is very good. I think it'll, I'd be very enthusiastic and supportive of it, but it needs the support at the partnership panel level, and without it, I don't think community planning will really deliver what it could do. So I think that is very important.
Yeah. I think really members are quite right. I think, through the disappointments of one plan and in Derry and the 36 neighbourhood renewal plans, people just got so disappointed about it. And there's a whole wish list in a way that was never fulfilled. So the buy-in from departments and the bodies that can deliver and give the cash and the staff time to do it, and if there is no buy-in, then it's just empty list of things that that could never come true. Okay, well, no more questions. Members, given the concerns expressed here about perhaps the difficulties of getting buy-in if we don't have the departments in it, if members would agree that we write to the Minister about this, about our concerns, that of the departments not, being included in the order as statutory bodies to be involved. Okay. Thank you. Thanks very much. Then we're back now then on to the main papers.
Thank God for grabbing.
Next one is item 7, members. It's the update on taxi legislation. We're getting a departmental briefing, members. So at our last meeting in April, 30th of April, we were briefed by Ian and his colleagues on the taxi meters and fares regulations, NI, and the taxi accessibility regulations. We were broadly content with both rules, subject to several issues being addressed sufficiently by the department. The department has now provided their response to those issues. If I can refer members now to the cover note at page 139. And the department's update on page 141. The regulations are already included in the pack for information.
Here's the bite. Actually, this is a bit over. I know, it's all over.
Hello. Hi. Hello, Michael. If I can welcome Ian Greenway, Michael O'Neill and Alex Boy. Hello again.
Thank you.
Yes. So all's done and well?
I like Nicola's phrase, Chairman, about being given the opportunity to come here this morning. I enjoyed that phrase.
Okay. Well, nearly done. We don't have too far to go now. To have everything kind of tied up. So please, if you can go ahead and give us your presentation then.
I don't have a specific presentation to make. My understanding is the committee wanted to seek potentially some assurances around the Dana letter that was issued to you last week before, on the points you had raised in our oral briefing on the 30th of April. We provided an update on that. In general terms on the programme, I can summarise by saying we are, as it says in the Dana letter, working at pace to implement the regulations as soon as possible. But we are conscious that's 10 regulations to be made. That includes some commencement orders, but there are 10 regulations to be made to give a scale of the work in hand.
Okay. Last time we talked quite a bit about the meters, safety installation of meters, not using cowboys to fix them, and you were to go and talk to. Why are you smiling, Alex? You were going to talk to the manufacturers of maybe saying that, you know, advising people that they should go to a proper firm to do the installation of the meters and quicker turnaround time as well for checking and the really the general health and safety issues in respect of fitting of meters. Yeah.
Yes, and we've addressed those points in the letter, Chair. We intend in the regulations to require that meters are fitted in a way that's compatible with manufacturers' instructions, and there is a general health and safety requirement. What I should also say in context is there are, to date, no known instances of meters in Northern Ireland in a taxi causing any electrical fire or whatever. That's not to say we rest on our laurels that may never happen, but we need to remain proportionate in this, I think. We also committed to see if manufacturers' instructions could start to talk about things needing to be fitted by an authorised agent. We will have those discussions, but pragmatically, when you're talking about a multi-million pound turnover German company with 0.1% of its market in Northern Ireland, to get them to do something in instructions that Northern Ireland would like them to do is going to be a challenge.
But that's not worldwide. If people are fitting meters, they need to be aware and adhere to all the health and safety issues.
Yes, and of course the law, the health and safety order, puts that requirement both on people who put these in a workplace, a taxi being a workplace, and indeed in whoever fits them, have health and safety duties, whether that be an authorised agent or, to use your language, a cowboy. The health and safety requirements still apply to them, as do many taxation and other requirements. So we believe that by putting in the requirement to fit to manufacturers' instructions, what we also are aware is this magical thing called a checksum, which is required before a meter will pass its sealing test in DVA. That limits the place. There are limited places you can go, in essence, people approved by the manufacturer who can put a checksum into a meter. So that's a further safeguard within the electronics, if you like, that you can't just go and buy. There was, I think, discussion last time about Gumtree and eBay and other routes to get a meter. You will get a meter, but you won't get a checksum without going to somebody authorised by the dealer. Now, you're perfectly entitled to go and buy a piece of hardware off Gumtree or eBay or at the local market or wherever it may be, but you will have to go to somebody authorised by the manufacturer to get that checksum, and that checksum is magical in as much as it's required before that meter can be accepted by DVA and sealed by DVA.
Okay. We also talked last time about your estimate of cost. The taxi industry was saying that you had kind of underestimated the cost of it. Have you checked into that?
Yeah, there are what the figures we had produced in the past had been £220 for a meter and £200 for a printer, so a total cost of £420. There's combination devices then that do both that are cheaper than that, so those figures still hold true. That you can get both those devices for that type of price. Obviously, if you want more functionality in whatever device you want, you'll pay more than that. But that's the starting level for them.
A number of taxi operators use devices that incorporate metering functionality and GPS functionality to manage the fleet. So when a call comes through to the operating centre, the nearest taxi can be alerted and go. That isn't required by the legislation, but has been installed by many taxi operators around Northern Ireland because it's cost effective for their business.
Sure.
But we're looking, in a sense, at the metering functionality. That's what the regulations are requiring, and the regulations are requiring that as a key consumer protection measure.
Yeah. Okay. Then we'll look at one thing at a time then, or just, and then we can talk to you about taxi accessibility next.
Okay.
Cathal, do you want to come in here?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thanks for. Yeah, we're nearly there, very close.
I'll take your word for it. I'll take your word for it.
I'm going to say where are you going to put this? No, I'm not getting into that cowboy issue, but just clarification on the testing and sealing. DVA is going to do that. Yeah.
Yes.
And in terms of the cost, Is there a cost for that now, and what's that going to cost?
We're approximating at £35.
£35.
And that's a one-off cost at the beginning of the regulations, if you like, and whenever a meter needs to be replaced or when tariffs in the meter are changed.
Okay, no, I mean, except that, I know Mr Weir's not here now, and he's put a lot
Is the
out.
tariff going to go up by inflation year by year? Sorry for jumping in, Carol.
It's for companies to decide what they charge. The regulations enable the department, and the department has chosen to bring forward regulations setting a maximum fare. And we have said we intend only to change that once every 2 years as a norm. If something very profound happens to the two big costs in there are salaries of the taxi driver and fuel costs.
Yeah.
In a sense, they're about 80% of the total cost base in the calculation. If diesel were to change profoundly in price, or if that salary, which is an average lorry driver's salary from ONS statistics or NISRA statistics, if they were to change profoundly, we may have to look at it. But we said we don't want to be changing the maximum fare every 3 months or whatever, that we recognise there needs to be stability. And as you'll see in the Dalo letter, we have rerun the figures that were last reviewed in 2011, and they've shown a reduction, if we just took all the figures and ran them, of 3.23% in the maximum fare. Now, our view is we will not make changes on the basis that it's within a 5% tolerance. So that gives you a feel, and that's over 4 years, that when we may feel that there have been profound changes to diesel prices that we feel we're paying for in our cars, but it isn't enough to throw that formula. So if a taxi firm wants to introduce additional tariffs, amend its tariffs, that of course is its commercial decision. If it does, it will need to have the meters change, the fare structure in the meters change. Then you checksum, we're back to this magical thing, a checksum, and then the meters will need to be resealed.
And you were saying £35 each
Yes.
time? Each car?
Each car.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, Carol.
Sorry, Chair.
I've forgotten your question.
Sorry if I just stop everyone here.
Now, but we deal with another issue. I mean, I was still just dealing with metering at the minute,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
You sure, Chair? Because I've another
Sure.
question to come in on something
You
else.
asked about meters and DVA and sealing them, yes?
Yeah, and the thing is that I know that
Can-
Mr Weir had contributed obviously to this, but I think his point was about, you know, the buy-in and installation. I mean, I can speak on his behalf because
He just passed the doors, actually, as we were waiting to come
That was
in.
the point he was making the last day. I mean, I'd be content with the answers given. I mean, clearly the cost and the sealing and fitting of them, I mean, it's grand. Thankfully we've got to this point.
In answer
I think
to your
after today, we can move forward.
Our intention is to move at pace. We do have a range of work to done. In answer to your question, I'm content with the department's answers, but I recognise the committee needs to satisfy itself. But this checksum and the centrality of that really steers people to authorised suppliers, authorised fitters, authorised agents. It's not for us again to second guess who a meter manufacturer chooses as their agent. But it's not in their interest to choose, back to your word again, Chair, it's not in their interest to choose a cowboy. And as a member of the taxi industry was saying to Michael and Alex yesterday, day before, if one meter installed by one supplier caused an electrical fire or whatever it may be, Northern Ireland's a small place, that provider isn't going to get much business very rapidly.
Okay. This gives me the opportunity to welcome the Ballyholme Primary School children here. Hello, good morning to all of you. We are the Environment Committee, and at the moment we are discussing taxi regulations with the officials from the Department of the Environment. Okay, you're all very welcome to stay and listen to it. It will affect you too if you take taxis.
You just don't have to pay for them for a while.
Don't charge them school buses.
You're probably being taken by your mums and dads all the time. Yeah. Right. We moved on then to the next issue.
Is the committee therefore content that, I mean, we are progressing with the meter stuff. We're along the lines that we discussed last time and with on the points we've made in the reply of in the Dalo letter reply.
Yeah. Are we content, members? Yes, we are. Thank you. The next set of concerns we had last time when we asked you in April was about the taxi accessibility issue, the health and safety requirement for pickups on streets. What about that? And then also we were talking to you about the rear loading of taxis, you know, how safe that is at ranks, and also about availability of wheelchair accessible taxis, the monitoring, you know, the number, whether it's going to drop, you know, following the regulations.
Article 5 of the Health and Safety at Work Northern Ireland Order 1978 imposes a duty on employers and self-employed people to conduct their undertakings in such a way that persons not in their employment are not exposed to risk. This requirement extends to transport operators. We propose that the existence of this duty is clearly communicated to taxi drivers and operators as part of the information and communication plan around the reform programme. So we believe that provides, again, a health and safety requirement that, putting it simply, taxi drivers, because it will be the driver more than the operator who's physically doing that activity, have to ensure safety of their passengers and have to ensure whatever type of vehicle they've got and whatever the particular needs of the passenger, whether it be somebody in a wheelchair, whether it's somebody be voluminous shopping, whether it be somebody who's intoxicated, whatever it may be, the taxi driver has that health and safety responsibility, and vicariously his employer, if he works for a depot, has that responsibility. The department, as we discussed last time, has taken the view that how people get into a vehicle, if that vehicle meets the specification and safety standards, whether it be by the front or, sorry, not by the front probably, if by the rear or the side, is a matter for safe manufacture of a vehicle. We do know that some wheelchair users, and you may know it yourselves with people with their own cars where a member of the household is in a wheelchair, prefer to come in at the back. That has certain advantages for certain types of wheelchair user. Others prefer to come in at the side. That has advantages for other types of wheelchair user. And we didn't feel it should be for us to regulate around that the vehicle manufacturers understand these things. We do recognise that coming out on the side may intrinsically seem safer on the street, leave aside ranks for a moment on the street, than coming out of the back. But again, this health and safety duty covers that. On the specifics of the rank, we are aware there are specific issues around the rank design and bringing somebody in at the back of a taxi. Our view on that, and we are continuing to liaise with DRD colleagues, is of the hundreds of hours of footage that were taken of ranks as part of the assessment of the availability of wheelchair accessible vehicles, I believe there were 2 instances. Of people in wheelchairs getting into a taxi at a rank. We all know intuitively people who have mobility constraints will tend to have a favoured taxi driver or taxi provider who will take them door to door. It perhaps is intuitively makes sense that people don't go to a rank on, most people do not go to the rank on an off chance in most situations. So we are conscious there are a limited number of instances. We do need to protect safety at those instances as well, but I don't think, for instance, it would be proportionate to change the entire infrastructure of every taxi rank in Northern Ireland. We're also conscious that people leave a taxi rank in a taxi that's at the front of the rank. So we need to think particularly of the infrastructure around the front of the rank, not necessarily at the back of the rank for this. So they are discussions we're continuing with DRD. DRD recognises this issue as well, and we will continue to work on that. And on the availability of taxis, we provided the report last year on the ITP report that showed a potential undersupply of wheelchair accessible vehicles in rural areas. We will have, as the Daily letter says, from when the new regulations are made, we will have Class B taxis, whereas currently we have Belfast public hire taxis that are all required to be wheelchair accessible, and a number of other vehicles that genuinely are wheelchair accessible, but we don't know those numbers within the other fleets. From the making of the regulations, we will know those numbers, be able to monitor them, be able to work with colleagues in different sectors to understand what requirements are, and if there is a shortfall, we can make regulations to require an increase in that size of fleet, but we need the evidence, of course, to move on that front.
Is there not a rule that there needs to be something like 8% of disability accessible vehicles for any big companies?
We have the ability under the Act to make regulations requiring a certain percentage of larger fleets.
Yes.
I don't think, again, regulations will specify what is a large fleet. Is it 10 vehicles, is it 50 vehicles, whatever it may be. We've chosen not to move on that at the moment because the evidence to date is there is not a significant undersupply. But in Cahill's famous review, post-implementation review of the Taxis Act, that will be one of the many issues to be considered. We do believe that a number of things we're doing will encourage some people to buy wheelchair accessible vehicles, but we do understand they're more, on average, more expensive vehicles to buy.
Yes. Yeah. I think the taxi industry would say it's a lot more expensive, 30-odd thousand.
Well, interestingly, when the analysis was done and we were looking at whether there should be a different charge for different types of taxi, for wheelchair accessible taxis and so on, get Michael to keep me right. When you look at the lifetime over which the taxi is used, the depreciation, the second-hand value, the mileage per gallon and so on, there wasn't a significant difference when you put all those. Is that correct, Michael?
Yeah, well, there's a tendency that vehicles are bought slightly older than you might do a saloon car, but there's no doubt that a wheelchair accessible vehicle, it's a larger vehicle, it has different functionality, so it'll be a more expensive vehicle. But the tendency is that the vehicles are bought slightly older and renewed slightly at a slightly longer period of renewal.
Okay.
So the annual depreciation cost is not dissimilar, okay, I think was the finding. Now we need to repeat that analysis periodically, of course.
But for the first time, as soon as these taxis are starting to get licensed, like the regulations at the moment are quite Belfast-centric in that we really only have wheelchair accessible vehicles legislatively in Belfast. So for the first time when these vehicles start to get registered as wheelchair accessible, we'll have data across across Northern Ireland as to where the taxis are and where they work.
Well, there are people in rural areas who need disabled taxis. Okay, what about pickups then? Now we have the exclusion zone. Are taxis allowed to pick up in, drop off and pick up in the bus lanes? Have we resolved that? You were talking with DRD on that issue.
At the minute, in bus lanes, only permitted taxis are allowed to use the bus lanes. But the definition of what is a permitted taxi is a responsibility for DRD. Because we're making these changes to our classification of taxis, DRD are likewise looking at what do they want to do, and they consulted a couple of years ago on letting all taxis in. And I think they're still making they're in the process of making a decision as to how they want to go forward. Our department has stated that our preference would be for wheelchair accessible taxis to be allowed in bus lanes, but obviously that's a decision for the Minister for DRD.
What about drop off though? We're talking of drop off and pick up, not actually driving on it all the time. But if I say I want to, for example, the other side of the High Court, Oxford Street, if I disabled, or if I want to come off there, there's bus lane all over, so I wouldn't be able to come off until way down.
Well, DRD's view is that they would, and the police indeed, would take a view as if you're in a private hire taxi, a non-Belfast public hire taxi, so that taxi can't drive in the bus lane down Oxford Street or Chichester Street, wherever it may be, but if you want to get off there and there are bus lanes blocking the getting off, they would take a proportionate view of enforcement about is safety being compromised. Are you stopping right in front of a bus, for instance? They would take that sort of view as to how they would enforce.
Okay.
Similarly, if you were driving your child down there and they needed to go off there, not in a taxi, in a private vehicle, and each day I come down Oxford Street, I see people, parts of the WLO lines getting outside the High Court. Officially, that's illegal. Yeah. But a proportionate view and a pragmatic view is taken by the enforcement authorities.
Okay. Any questions on this, Carl?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just quickly, I still have a wee bit of concern. I think there's a bit of work to be done with the ORD in terms of ranks, especially in the rear loading issue. If you imagine, because there's not enough spaces, you've got this parallel parking where they do lifts and that. You know what I mean? So we need to be very, very careful. I'm just wondering what discussions have you had? I mean, that obviously, clearly, for a rear loading vehicle, you need a certain space to, you know, to load and unload. And I'm just wondering where the scope of work has been with DRD and finalising this. Accessible. Yeah.
Part of the difficulty, Cal, as we've discussed before, is the number of ranks that there are and the space that they have available, and it is a difficult issue for DRD because a pragmatic solution would be to extend the rank to make it longer, perhaps to allow for, as Ian rightly said, the front vehicle to be, you know, move forward so that rear loading can take place. So we have started an engagement process with DRD around that, the practicalities of that and how possible that would be. Can they do that, for example? And they will be limited, obviously, by the space that's available at the rank. But you're right, it's an issue that has to be bottomed out, and it's an ongoing process with them. They're aware of the difficulty, I think, as Michael also said, around the rear-loading vehicles. And they're very content and happy to try and come up, as we are, with some sort of workable solution.
Right. We are conscious when some of the busy ranks at the moment, actually the way the taxi drivers self-marshal, if you like, on some of them the vehicle that leaves first is not the one nearest to the curb. So even on side-loading taxis, there would be an issue. But I assume a pragmatic approach comes along. The wheelchair user comes along. They get in the taxi nearest the curb, even though that isn't the first one in the rota to leave. So I would see pragmatism applies already. So the number of wheelchair loading, wheelchair accessible vehicle taxis in Belfast, which is where the bulk of the ranks are, in the short term, is going to be pretty limited. So we do want to find a proportionate approach with DRD that nonetheless protects the safety of the wheelchair user and indeed the taxi driver loading them into the vehicle.
No, and that's fair. I mean, I don't want to delay the conversation any longer. Members are want to get out of here. But the reality is this here is that certainly at this point in time, that's grand. You've outlined the scenarios where these things will happen. All I'm saying is you can't be saying it's health and safety and regulation, and you have to allow so much distance for loading people in. At the minute, the way it sits, there is difficulties. So we need to iron that out.
Yeah. And I certainly commit we will continue to work closely with DRD on that. But as Alex says, there is a finite amount of curb space, and we do need to recognise that as well.
Okay. Chair, there is one other issue I need to bring up.
Sure.
I know it's not on the list. It's the issue of the signage in terms of taxi sign. See the way we're going to operate a single tier certain times of the weekend?
Yes.
How does that work in terms of the overall signage? How do you identify, or is there going to be complications with that when you?
I think it's fair to say we all recognise when the committee signed off a model of licensing that varied by location and by time of day, stroke day of week. That there would be complexities, and Chair, you'd been consistent and strident in this throughout the process, that it needs to be understood by the user as well as the taxi provider. We have ended up with a complex system, let's face it, but we are where we are. We want to move this over the line, and I think the bulk of stakeholders want to move this over the line as well, the consumer stakeholders and taxi industry stakeholders. We have been discussing, indeed we were discussing yesterday, the signage on taxis. It says yellow signs, and the regulations as drafted say yellow signs, certain heights, certain, etc., etc. And wheelchair accessible vehicles, Class B taxis, will have the international symbol for wheelchair on the sign, front facing and rear facing. We have been reflecting, and stakeholders have made the point that that works well in a single tier environment, because the wheelchair piece is about that they stand at ranks, in essence, and that you don't have to look at a moving feature. But if a taxi is coming down Oxford Street towards you with a yellow sign on it, and you don't know whether you can hail that because it's within the 2-mile limit because it's 3 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon, that is complicated. So we have been looking at, should Class B taxis, for instance, have a different colour attached to them. Now that would distinguish at 3 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon. Of course, at 2 o'clock on a Sunday morning, both yellow and purple could be apply for hire. But we have been looking at the issue of a different colour. We have been looking at, well, would that add to cost, because sign suppliers would need 2 different colours. we've sort of come to the view that these signs have to, signs have to be fitted on a rolling 12-month cycle whenever your first vehicle test is due after the regulations are made. And we're looking at wheelchair accessible vehicles, a few hundred out of the 10,000 taxis. So we are very open to the idea of another colour. The drafting work is not insurmountable. And we have to make sure you can't use red, for instance, because of emergency light regulations and so on. There are certain colours may not be suitable to use in a Northern Irish context. So we will look at Pantone colours that tick off all of the particular requirements. So we were talking about purple, for instance, for wheelchair accessible vehicles.
Complication, dazed and confused, but thanks very much for that.
No, we are actively looking, and we're open to that point. It's a valid point that's been made, and we want to see our way through that one.
That's a complicated situation. No, thank you very much for that.
Yeah. You see, in some cities, right, the taxis would have lights on the roof to say that they're available to, for customers to hail, or a little flag in front. So, I mean, we can do something like that, to differentiate what time you can hail the taxi in Belfast and what time you can't.
The regulations, when we were at single tier, in those halcyon days, the regulations did require a begging light, is the vernacular for it, that showed I'm a begging light. I'm available for hire if it's lit. I'm not available for hire either because I've got a passenger on board or I'm off duty.
Yes. Yes.
And we have dropped that from the regulations because Class A taxis, which is the bulk of taxis, would have to have a light when it was a single tier time and not when it wasn't a single tier time, and we felt that just made the technology overcomplicated and over-expensive. So we've removed the requirement for a light. Doesn't mean people cannot have them, but there is no mandatory requirement to have them. The existing public hire fleet, I would assume, will continue to use their begging lights as they do now. They will have a roof sign as well, so with the operator details and so on. So we've removed that light piece because we thought engineering-wise it just got too complex. It is something we'll need to keep under review as this two-tier, two-time of day of week model rolls out. We will need to see how we keep it as simple as possible.
And different days as well.
On different days and bank holidays, and if there's an hour in the month, and if the sun's shining, and all the different variables we've built in.
Okay. Yeah. When is the commencement date now we have agreed? In June or September?
It's not June. I can certainly assure you that before Michael falls off his seat. We are actively and at pace working for the licensing regulations to the end of September, which is the date that's been committed.
Okay.
Although we did hope to have it in June. Well, mind you, we did hope last year, September.
We
changed the date.
We have many
times.
dates we've been working towards.
Yes.
We are working as quickly as possible, but the licensing regulations now with the 2-mile limit, different times of day, etc., are not straightforward to draft and take time. We have to have a map to back them up, and that's not something staff in this division have done before. Of course, it's been done in local government policy with the boundaries order for the councils. We are working with the mapping people in DFP and LPS to get that map, and there are a lot of elements. I mean, that piece about a Class B taxi having a different colour roof sign, that's simplish, sorry, Michael, but it's alongside 53 other things that are under active consideration, assembly questions to be answered, correspondence cases to be dealt with, committee to come and brief. There's an awful lot of work, and we're heading into time when people are taking leave and so on, so we are working as hard as we possibly can on it.
Would the 2-mile limit go as far as University Street, where my constituency office is?
It's partway down the Lisbon Road, the 2-mile limit.
In South Belfast, the roundabout, the Ormer Road and Ravenhill Road, that's 2 miles exactly.
Ormer Road.
So my constituents
Probably as far as the Chelsea Bar, Chair.
Okay.
It's not as far as the King's Hall.
Right.
Yeah, not that I would know.
Chelsea Bar and Hallmark.
Sandra, you want?
Yes, thanks. I just wanted to come in. You were talking about how you need to be sensitive to colours in particular areas and such like. Have you taken into consideration the sensitivities of certain taxis going into other certain areas that they may feel intimidated by or that sort of circumstances?
We're regulating for classes of taxi. based on the engineering of the vehicle and the function to which they're put. Chauffeur-driven cars, wedding cars are a different class than the, if you like, the traditional, conventional taxi you can hail on the street or dial up. We have not, beyond the 2 mile limit, which is a geographical thing, we have not done anything about areas. Different firms will choose to work in different, already choose to work in different areas. We're aware of that. And we're aware, probably pragmatically on the ground, there are informal agreements between taxi firms as to who works where and where the heart of people's business is. We believe it's for us to regulate that all taxis and all operators and all drivers must meet certain standards, cannot overcharge the customer, and vehicles are tested on a regular basis. Drivers have to do continuous training, which includes disability awareness, etc., to define and start to define geography. We don't believe is our responsibility.
Yeah, of course. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. And when are you going to start your communication campaign with all these different changes?
Very soon, and we're conscious actually the most pressing piece is around the meters, because manufacturers have to supply to the fitters who have to, it's not just buying the meter, it's the fitting of it in the vehicle, and the meter suppliers are quite rightly making the point to us there is a time frame. So we have been looking at how do we mitigate that. We know that DVA and the test centres are quieter in October, November, December. There are a lot more cars registered in the early months of the year, normal cars. So MOT testing is much busier from January to Easter. So the time to train people in the test centres, the time to do the meter testing with those staff who are flat out on MOT testing. So there's a whole range of factors, but the meter communications are the most pressing. Because part of me wants to say, and says to Michael, and he kicks back at it, people have known for 3 years meters have been required, but it's only just recently we've really nailed down the detail. So people now have to go out and buy meters, get them fitted. The licensing regulations aren't as pressing in communication terms because there aren't as many pre-stages before their implementation. But DVA, the department, is working on a suite of communications. Predominantly at the moment for the taxi industry, the communications for taxi users will come as the regulations come into effect. But it's a taxi industry that needs time to understand the matters. So we're talking about this month, certainly.
But for the general public would be what, in September?
Yes,
So?
it'll be around about the implementation date.
Yeah.
The offence, of course, is committed by the taxi driver if he picks up where he or she shouldn't. But we don't want the public not understanding why that taxi driver's driven past them, for instance.
Sure, sorry, the public will find their own way. Not a problem on this.
Oh, I don't think so. There'll be confusion for a while anyway. Yeah. You get complaints as well. People say, why can't they get the taxi in the city hall, outside the city hall or whatever. But anyway.
Outside the city hall is easy because there's a taxi rank there. Halfway down Chichester Street, 3 taxis driving past them may be harder to explain.
Okay, members, any questions, any issues? Happy with the regulations going through?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much
Thank you very
indeed.
much, gentlemen. Thank you. And by the way, when I say being diplomatic, I don't mean you not being diplomatic.
Okay.
I meant
Nicola
being diplomatic. Didn't mean you.
That's okay. I thought that's okay.
Okay, members, moving on. Then on to consultations, quickly. One, you have your cover note there on page 153. Members, if you have any comments and if you're content to request a synopsis of responses to those consultations listed in the note.
Great, Chair.
Okay, then next, just bring your attention to a couple of things. Item 8.6 there on page 184 is a synopsis of responses for the consultation of the draft waste management licensing amendment regulations. This consultation ran from 29th January to the 23rd of April this year, and a total of 7 responses were received, all of which supported the proposed regulations. Are members content then for the department to prepare the SL1 for this legislation?
Great.
Content, thank you. Next item, 8.7 on page 193 is a synopsis of responses for the consultation on the proposed draft local government domain names regulation. specifying a standard format for the domain names of council websites. This consultation ran for 8 weeks, ending on the 30th of March, and a total of 5 responses were received. Following the consultation, the department will require councils to include their actual name in the council's domain name. Well, considers it appropriate to specify a range of domain name formats, does not support restricting the range of domain names councils can use to one, for example, .gov.uk, and shall provide for others, including .com and .ie as an alternative format which councils may use. So in other words, it's not just .gov.uk. They can have a few other alternatives as well. So members, are you content for the department to prepare for the SL1, for legislation, or do you feel you want a briefing on this? So it's on the domain name on the website.
Can we have .ie, no?
You can have .ie if councils prefer.
It starts at page 194.
I'm sure there's still time if you want an oral briefing. Before we
Yes. Yeah, sure, yeah.
We'll do that then, members.
Yeah.
Members,
I think we just listen to the SL1 first.
okay.
Is that time
this
enough?
Yes, this is just the
listen.
this is the synopsis of responses to the consultation. So what they will then do is prepare an SL1.
Yeah.
So if members are content, we could ask them to prepare the SL1 to come up and formally brief us
Yeah.
on the SL1 itself, and then
Yeah.
obviously,
That's okay, yeah?
Yeah.
We're happy enough, yeah? Content?
Yeah, including then the synopsis. You can talk about that too.
yes,
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, members, then an SL1 for you to consider. That's the smoke control areas, exempted fireplace. The purpose of the rule is to amend the provisions of the smoke control areas exempted fireplace number 2 regulations, Northern Ireland 2013, to include a number of additional fireplaces. I don't know, there's so many new fireplaces. We've been looking at this on many occasions. So it's really including a number of additional fireplaces to the schedule that have been tested and found to be suitable for use in smoke control areas. The statutory rule is subject to negative resolution and is proposed to come into operation in July 2015. Members content for the department to proceed with making the rule?
Is it a burning issue, Chair? Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
It is, I
Yeah,
think.
okay, we're content, Chair. Content.
Another SL1, item 10 on page 208, members. That's the local government reorganisation compensation for loss of employment amendment regulations. The purpose of the rule is to amend the current provisions of the local government reorganisation regulations agreed by the committee on the 26th of February to include a local government staff commission under the definition of a local government body and to correct technical amendments suggested by the examiner of statutory rules in his April report. The statutory rule is subject to the negative resolution procedure and is proposed to come into operation as soon as possible. Members, are you content for the department to proceed with making the rule?
Great.
Thank you. Item 11 on page 215 is an SR on Local Government Act and commencement order. The commencement number 4 order brings into operation a range of provisions of the Local Government Act and NI 2014. The committee does not have any formal scrutiny rule with regard to commencement orders, so this is just for members to note. Are you content to note?
Great.
Thank you. Item 12 on page 225 is the draft statutory rule, the Marine Conservation Fixed Monitoring Penalties Order. Members, an amended draft statutory rule was received yesterday by the department and is in members' tabled packs at page 58. The overall purpose of the rule is to provide for the use of a civil sanction in the form of a fixed monetary penalty whereby laws have been contravened. Following a discussion with the examiner of statutory rules, the department has made an amendment to Article 8. The amendment does not alter the intent of the provision, which relates to discount for early payment, where objections or representations are made but provides greater legal certainty for those sanctioned. The committee considered the SL1 for this rule at our meeting on 23rd of April 2015, and we were content for the department to make the rule. The rule is subject to the affirmative resolution procedure. The examiner of statutory rules has not yet commented on the amended rule. If members are content, I'll put the following question to you: that the Committee for the Environment has considered the Marine Conservation Fixed Monetary Penalties Order NI 2015 and, subject to the report of the Examiner of Statutory Rules, recommends that the rule is affirmed by the Assembly. Are members agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Next item on page 239, item 13, and SR on the environmental liability regulations. The purpose of the rule is to implement the EU Offshore Services Directive to address the prevention and correction of damage in the marine environment. The committee considered the SL1 for this rule at this meeting on the 23rd of April 2015 and was content for the department to make the rule. The rule is subject to the negative resolution procedure. The examiner of statutory rules is content with the technical aspects of the rule. If members are content, I'll put the following question to you. The Committee for the Environment has considered SR 2015/231, the Environmental Liability Prevention and Remedial Amendment Regulations NI 2015, and has no objection to the rule. Are members agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 14 is correspondence, members. You have a list of correspondence on page 248. Item 14.1 on page 249 is an invitation to the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission's inaugural social justice lecture on Tuesday, the 9th of June 2015. Members, if you wish to attend the event, please let committee staff know and they can respond. Okay. Would you be interested, Sir Alan, Auburn?
Yes, I would be interested.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, actually. Yep. Sounds quite a lot of very good speakers. Yeah. Okay. I check on the day. That's the problem on Tuesday.
Yeah, it's very.
It's from about 5:30 or so. If I can make it.
From 4 to 6.
From 4 to 6. Yeah.
Our council.
Okay. In the Bar Council. Yeah. Which you're familiar, I'm sure.
Slightly. Vaguely.
Item 14.5 on page 281 is a statement from the Quarry Products Association NI expressing concerns about the decision by the planning service relating to the sand industry to Lough Neagh. Members, you may remember we sent a letter to the department also asking about the article on the Irish News about the continued practice of sand extraction, and then the department then has ordered a ban on the industry to extract sand until they see the application, retrospective planning application for it, and I think for an assessment, probably an environmental assessment as well. So this is a letter from the Quarry Products Association, about their concerns of the loss of jobs and the impact on the industry. So members, if we forward their letter to the department and ask for the response.
Great.
Is that okay? Thank you. Then item 14.7 on page 284 is a letter from the department regarding proposed DETI legislation relating to genetically modified organisms. DETI has a role through the Health and Safety Executive in relation to the contained use of GMOs. A consolidation of health and safety regulation has been completed in GB, and the Health and Safety Executive are undertaking the parallel process in Northern Ireland. There is no crops in Northern Ireland on GMOs crops. The ETI committee has sent a memo in your table packed, page 68, and advised that they are content for DETI to proceed. Members, are you content to note?
Great.
Yep. Item 14.8 on page 297 is correspondence forwarded by DOE regarding a DETI statutory rule on the control of major accident hazards regulations. The rule aims to prevent onshore industrial major accident and to limit their consequences to people and the environment. In Northern Ireland, the regime is currently enforced by the Health and Safety Executive, NI, and NIEA working together as the competent authority. The proposed statutory rule will maintain that position. Executive Committee referral is required. The rule has been considered by the ETI Committee, who is content. So, members, are you content with this? The memo from ETI has been tabled separately, members. Are members content to note?
Great.
Okay. Then next item is 14.9 on page 355, a big document. That's the annual progress report on the cross-departmental working group on climate change. Really very interesting, members. I thought it was a very good report, very easy to read, in fairly, easy layman term, not all technical terms as well. Certainly, I thought it was very good. It has talked about seems to be we are not anticipating that we will be reaching the target of 35% of reduction. Our programme for government target for 2025. Yeah, that's his target of 35%. It's anticipated we'll fall short of it to about 33.5%. And it mentioned, certainly in the report, mitigating measures and adaptation programs, although I thought it was just very much headlines about the measures, like going to EU for money for initiatives and more cross-border collaboration. And I just wonder, would members like to ask them for a briefing or ask them for a written response about maybe more detail in the headline? I'm just trying to find that page for you. I was 3.5.
Through you, Chair, I think the best thing to do is get a briefing on it, Chair.
Yeah, briefing. Would members be content to ask for a briefing?
For one reason, I know there's a PFG target, but here's the story.
Yeah.
I mean, some of these targets may have been set too high; they may not be achieved. So,
okay.
I think the best thing for the committee to do is have a briefing on it. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. Yep. So we'll do that, and then. Members, then, have you any comments on any of these or any other items under what's correspondence? Under correspondence?
Yes,
Yep.
correspondence.
And members, are you content then with the suggested actions on the cover note?
Great.
Thank you. The next item, forward work programme at page 445. Members, are you content with the forward work programme actions listed there?
Great.
Okay, thank you. Want to seek your agreement then to hold a committee meeting on the 11th and the 25th of June in room 30, because the COW committee is wanting to hold full day meetings. They can have their own room in the morning and afternoon, so they would like to use the Senate chamber on those 2 days, because they are looking. They're looking at, they are having their investigation. Sorry?
What if we object? I mean, is that an issue?
And we want to be cooperative.
That's okay.
Yes, yes. So members, just
Chair,
will
even
remind you.
Even if Cahill opposes it, I'll support it.
You're in the COW committee, and yes, we blame it on you. All right. So I will remind members it's next 2 weeks will be in room 30. It's actually quite a nice room. Gary, it's a quieter, kind of more cozy room. Yeah, yeah. Okay, AOB, any?
Chair.
Yeah.
Chair, could you please ask the department to give us an update on the north-south interconnector? A few issues in terms of air grid in the south. And I'd like a wee update to see where we are in the north here in relation to the application process, please.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Quite agree. We haven't heard about it for a while. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
Just a quick one, and obviously I'm just on the committee this last number of weeks. In relation to an update from the department in relation to road safety, and I don't know when the last briefing was, but obviously members will be aware of the tragedy yesterday in relation to the two young men who were killed in the accident, and the two that were injured as well. And I think it would be timely just to get a briefing, because I know there's been a total now of 28 deaths on the road this year already. And it's just to see what progress the department's making in relation to road safety.
Yeah, we do. Yep. Thank you. So, members, the next meeting is Tuesday, the 11th of June, in room 30. I'll send my apology now. I'm going to be away for a conference, so the Vice Chair is going to be chairing the meeting.
Accept my apologies.
Okay.
You going to?
That's good.
I haven't read any details.
I know.
Early one the day.
Busy last
The agenda. So,
Is there one else?
the agenda.
Yeah, sorry.